So, welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. I got a bit of preamble. I don't have Twitter, but I have invented a hashtag, so do feel free to tweet about that. And also, I do totally welcome emails, so feel free to email me at work. Let's get started. So, imagine for a moment you're a firefighter. You don't just jump into the deep end and start fighting fires out in production. How do you prepare yourself to face those fires? This picture sums it up perfectly. You work within a controlled environment to learn how to deal with these kind of as close to production environments as possible, these situations. So today I'm going to be talking about how we can apply just this method to incident management within technology. And I wanted to start with a story about an incident at the Financial Times. So just imagine, what's the worst incident that you've been involved with? Like at work, outside of work. I'm going to run through a few and see, do you think that's the worst one that we've encountered? Was it that time at the FT where we accidentally DOSed a third-party vendor that we integrate with by hammering their purging service? That was pretty bad. We got a really kind of sudden Slack message about that and had to fix it out of hours. That wasn't our worst one. Could it be that time that we really wanted people to accept those cookie messages? Because GDPR come in. Every page we showed that message, you could not dismiss it. That was terrible user experience, but it wasn't our worst incident at all. How about that time that Boris actually broke our live blogs? It just was so popular, and it was kind of running on a bit flaky infrastructure at the time. And so we couldn't actually publish that breaking news as it was happening. It was awful from the journalist's perspective, from a user's perspective, but definitely not the worst one. How about how about that time where we just lost our domain? Thoughts? Do you think that's the worst one? Yeah, that was definitely the worst one. So I'm going to dig into that today, but a little tangent first. You might have noticed there's a bit of a naming scheme. I learned through writing this talk that we've actually started naming all of our incidents since 2016, after the way that Friends name their episodes. I only learned about this last week, but I just love it. And we're really consistent there. So, back to the incident. I have a flatmate, Andrew, and he wants to read some FT, so I send him my password. Probably not allowed, but done it. And he tries to log into the app on the 21st of January, so not very long ago. And he tells me it doesn't work. He sends me the error message. That's not a really nice error message, certainly. And I'm like, well, it's probably a network thing, right? Just try again, would you? He's like, no, this is really broken. So I check my phone I check Slack on my phone. I haven't been called at this point, but I see the following message from Alice, my peer. This is the first thing I see. And I want to point out two things that made me realize this was really bad. First, Alice has sworn. She never swears. So, this is really bad. And she didn't bother capitalizing my name. There's no time for that. So, the ft.com zone was missing. What does that look like? Something like this. This is not good. If you tried ft.com, that wasn't resolving either. App.ft.com, where we do our app, that was not working either. So it turns out we actually have about 5,100 subdomains on ft.com. None of them were working. This is dire. We have tools all over the company relying on this domain. Internal tools, public-facing websites. It impacted the whole company. Our journalists are impacted, our users are impacted, our engineers are impacted. There's a funny bit later I'll talk about. So for 3 years, I've logged into this dashboard every week, probably, to make changes, and I've always seen ft.com listed there. This is the first time ever that was just not there. That is not what you want to see. Really not what you want to see. We've never prepared for such an incident. How could we? You'd never expect our vendor to kind of have something disappear, or a change that we make kind of implement or cause such a serious situation. But it's also really, it's just a classic data loss situation as well. It's just it's not a database, but it's data we've lost. So just like any other classic data loss situation, we don't have a backup that's actually recent, always tested to make sure it restores properly. Some people have run scripts in the past that have downloaded our information. There's going to be a lot of changes since October. That was for sure. But fortunately, it turned out, after about an hour of communicating with our vendor, they actually had a backup. It was only partial, though. And it turned out the things that were missing were the most critical. We use DNS for some of our subdomains, and they're used for load balancing. They're slightly more complex services. And it meant ft.com wasn't working, and a lot of editorial tools as well that we need to use to fail over. About 10 people worked on this incident. And we had actually 30 people online who had joined, and they were there just to help out if need be. Most were not called, like me, but they still all volunteered their time and were willing to support restoring the service. A little insight on what it looked like. This is the view from our ft.com homepage, and we ended up having 4 hours and 30 minutes of outage. And it was really weird because it's DNS, right? And the first hour was just total. And then after that, we started to restore stuff automatically and by hand. And eventually, we got the service working again. And during this incident, there was a total lack of panic. It was so calm. I joined an hour in, so people had already started understanding what caused the problem and were focused on the resolution. But during the incident, there was a total lack of panic. It was a slick operation, and we recovered. It took restoring from that backup and manual entry, remembering literally what we've actually got in our heads and not written down, to be able to get back to where we needed to be able to go to sleep. After that first hour, when we understood the problem, the whole time we were focused on the recovery. Not once did we talk about who made the change, what caused it. It wasn't going to help. And it was a wonderful example of the discipline that we want to see during our incidents. And those 20 people that weren't actually involved in recovering are actually just there to learn. That was the biggest thing that I understood, the most impressive thing. They wanted to see, like, if they needed to help out, they could, but also they just wanted to see how it was working, how we were recovering, what we were doing. You know, for the next day, is there anything that they're going to need to pick up? So we celebrated just past 12. Everything was good enough for us to go to sleep and come and fix the next day. And we were supplied with cake for the rest of the week. We also had time in lieu. So that's kind of a picture of where we are today with incident management at the FT. And I think it's really positive. So, if you hadn't already guessed, I work at the Financial Times. I'm Sam, and a principal engineer at FT. I work on the group that builds ft.com, our flagship product, and our Android and iOS apps. I've joined about 3 years ago, and I started in the infrastructure teams. And since then, I've kind of morphed slowly back into software engineering. A bit of context. So what I want to talk about today is how we do on call, how we structure ourselves within the FT, because it's a large company. There's 1,000 people in our office just in London. And a bit about what we actually care about in an incident from the perspective of incidents. Then I'm going to talk about our challenges that we faced in 2019, my personal group, why I'm talking here today. And then I'm going to talk about how we addressed those challenges and made our out-of-hours team sustainable. And then I'm going to talk if it even worked. The spoiler is yes, that's why I'm here. And some things you can take back to your own teams and hopefully motivate them to get involved with incident management. So how do we do on call? I'm going to start quickly with a little overview of how we structure ourselves at the FT. We split ourselves into groups, we call them. And I work within customer products. We build the customer-facing products. We are 45 engineers and counting. More on that later. And we've gone down that microservices route. We run about 180 systems. It looks something like this. I don't have that Monzo diagram with all the kind of connections or anything, but I do have a scroll bar that's really small. That's the best I got. And we split ourselves into 9 teams, which works out about 20 each, I think. There's a lot to maintain, a lot to be aware of. I just want you to think about that throughout this talk. It's like, when you're coming onto an incident, you're supporting 180 systems, like, are you ever going to have the full in-depth knowledge of all of those to be able to support them? So these are the teams that we split into. Content innovation, content discovery, apps, of course, ads privacy, GDPR, accounts, acquire, platforms, US growth. But I wanted to talk about our OpsCops team a little bit. We have an OpsCops team. It's made up of one permanent tech lead. We try and rotate every 6 months. And then 2 engineers who come in once a week from each of the other teams. And they are our primary incident management team during the week in hours. At the Financial Times, so across the company, we also have an operations team that help monitor our entire technical estate 24/7. If you've been to my colleague's talk earlier, Luke, you might have seen a hint of this dashboard already. There is a lot of stuff. It's fascinating what we built to be able to do this. But from my perspective, our systems and customer products are just a drop in the pond. So that leads us to talking about how we actually look after our things. We've got this this mentality of you build it, you run it. There's no way we can kind of lean on operations entirely to be able to look after our stuff. We support our systems out of hours as well. And this is our approach within the Financial Times to DevOps, quite across the company. One way of describing this I like is to say that our engineers wear many hats: QA, incident management, engineering, of course, and infrastructure as well. We expect our engineers to be able to put our systems out into production. Today, we're going to put on our incident management hat. So how do we support out of hours? How do we do the support out of hours? So it's a volunteer setup. People say, yes, I want to join this out of hours team. We don't have shifts. Now, this is slightly weird, so I'm going to dig into this a bit. We don't do that week on, week off kind of schedule that is kind of typical for an out of hours team. So what it ends up looking like is our operations team spot a problem out of hours, and they end up calling us on the rota and seeing who's available. And it's kind of hit and miss. We end up with a lot of voicemails or a lot of missed calls that we have to call back on. Which does mean we could be all unavailable in the cinema, right? So far, we've been lucky, and it works out really well, and it's very flexible. It allows us to kind of work the way we work. So what do we care about as well? We've started talking about business capabilities at the FT. This is a new approach to kind of how we monitor, and it's putting the user first. So now we're kind of thinking in terms of, can a user sign in? Like, is that working? And it's a really great way of us being able to think about the impact from the user's perspective when something goes wrong, because we're actually monitoring that business capability. And I was asked to have a think about what is an incident in the FT. And I think this is a really tricky one to answer, actually. So from my perspective within customer products, it's very much about, is there an end-user impact? Is there something we need to fix quickly to ensure our users can have a good experience? But I think actually, if you go around our company as a whole and ask each group, it might be a very different answer. But I think we're starting to consolidate around this business capabilities idea. So customer products, my group, has 2 really important business capabilities. First one, our users should always be able to read the news. Can't do that, we're not selling our product very well. And the other one is, our journalists must be able to publish news. If we have breaking news, but the journalists can't get it to our users, we're still not in a good place. If either of these go wrong, we declare an incident. Our users will see something like this, and hopefully, our engineers will be able to see a graph like this. Not always. So that's the context. Let's dig into the challenges that we faced in 2019 around incident management. To start, we weren't immediately productive on call from my perspective. It might be late in the night. Of course, it's going to take time to actually just wake up. But I think there were some elements that I want to dig into as well. We had an engineering mindset in an operations situation. so typical, I think, across this industry. What it meant was we just jumped straight into the code. And I think this comes from the fact that within my group, we are made up entirely of engineers. We don't have specialisms in different areas. So we don't have site reliability engineers, and we don't have specialisms for DevOps. But it means we kind of jump into what we're comfortable with. I like this quote from a member of the operations team. I always start with impact and comms, and they, the engineers here, us, we just jump in at the tech. It's just the total inverse of what they do. And the other part was that our incident management process wasn't actually second nature to us. It was very organic. Sometimes we'd make an incident channel. Sometimes we'd start a hangout. Sometimes we'd remember to do communication and say, like, here's what's happening, here's the impact. But often that was kind of hit and miss. We also had we didn't actually have many incidents in the first half of 2019. I counted, it was 10 in total, and only one of those are out of hours, which doesn't leave us much room for practicing and being prepared for shadowing, getting people involved with these incidents. And most crucially, going back to how we run our out-of-hours team, we were down to 5 people. So it was really likely that we were actually all in the cinema at the same time. So we set out to make our out-of-hours team sustainable. So how did we do that? Well, we started out by asking our engineers what's going on. And we surveyed them about helping out during an incident. It turned out there are actually a lot of people who were already on the fence. We just simply hadn't asked people, do you want to join? So this made our lives a little bit easier. There were 3 people that were like, yeah, okay, we can do that, great. But there were 7 people on the fence, 7 people we needed to convince to get us back to that sustainable position with our team. We want to understand a bit why they were on the fence. What could we do? And I got quotes like this around that kind of having that in-depth knowledge, that domain understanding of 180 systems. So we needed to think about how we could convince these people who wanted that in-depth knowledge. Actually, you might not. So we set out in 2019 to convince people to join our team. We did this by running incident workshops. I've heard some other phrases, so disaster recovery workshops or tabletop exercises. And these will allow us to prepare our engineers for incidents, but out of the kind of stress of production. And following that, we also ended up writing a generic runbook for our microservices. Because it became clear through the incident workshops that they weren't all aware that we can treat a lot of our 180 systems the same and homogeneous. And it allowed us to document all the things that you could do to our systems in one place so that you could actually apply it to, hopefully, most of those systems. And we actually set out in the last 6 months of 2019 to address this. So let's have a look at what an incident workshop looks like, how you can go away and build your own. Firstly, don't panic. I know it's the 3rd day, last day. We're just before lunch. I've got at the end links to all the ones that we've prepared so you can use those to kind of build your own. So don't feel too stressed about following along here. But set aside yourself a couple of hours to write the workshop. It shouldn't take more than that. A lot of this is going to be coming back to making sure that this is sustainable for yourself to be able to run them. Start by having a read of your old incidents. They're an absolute treasure trove of information, so there's a great opportunity to learn for yourself. So today I'm going to kind of follow along where we wrote an incident workshop based on when our RSS became popular again. It turns out, so we have APIs at the FT to sell our headlines, but people still really like RSS feeds. This ended up degrading our website and causing bad service for users. So use that first page of this incident workshop to set the scene. You're kind of providing background, but not that much information. And it might look something like this. It's going to be a page full of alerts, right? That's the first thing that engineers really get to know when there's an incident going on. Something's alerting, usually. In this case, we're looking at our Heroku dashboard and the alerts in there. And we're kind of kind. We provided a graph in this case. Most of the time, it's Slack. Pingdom alerts, health checks going wrong. You then want to follow it with several pages of graphs and information. Not too much, plenty of space so people can write down. Here we've got Fastly, our dashboard in the bottom, and then a few graphs from our systems from Grafana. And each page is kind of progressing that incident. So if you've picked one that has an incident timeline, that's great. You just follow along with that. This is the story you're following. Here we're going past the graphs. We've kind of got a bit more of an understanding. So during the actual incident, we went into Splunk and searched, what are the IP addresses that are causing this? So we provide that information in the workshop. So make sure that there's opportunities during the workshop to ask about the tools and systems that people might be using to resolve the incident. And include the dead ends, because that's what actually happens in production. You don't want to narrow down on one root cause. You actually want to be able to recreate the fact that you do hit a dead end, and that wasn't the right cause of the problem. One of my favorites was, there was an incident going on, this RSS incident, and I was told during the incident, as we were resolving it, about a bunch of emails and push notifications that went out at the same time. And they lined up so perfectly with the graphs. And you're like, oh, that is the cause. They had nothing to do with the incident. Then wrap it up in a summary page. This is where you're kind of running through, with the people in the workshop, what actually happened in the incident. They want to know what happened. What did you actually do in production? Does it match what we kind of worked through in the workshop itself? And what caused the incident? Do we know? We might not know. My main takeaway here is to keep it minimal. I went into this, and there was a lot of over-engineering going on. We were thinking about making interactive graphs and dashboards, preparing data sets, and kind of making it very hands-on, kind of build your own adventure. But that's not the way to approach this, I think. I think the best thing to do is keep it minimal, lightweight, just paper. That way it encourages a lot of discussion. It gives a lot of freedom for the conversations to kind of open up and people to just share what they know between everybody. And you end up with something like this. Key points here would be print it out on A3 and give one stack per team. Bring a bunch of pens along because people are going to write a lot of really interesting things on these notes. So now you've got your material. What's it like to run your own incident workshop? You pretend to be the incident lead, incident commander, and you want to start by just splitting out into small teams of 3, 4, 5 people. No more. You're kind of huddling. You want to get a really collaborative situation going on. It might look something like this. I think this was our first workshop that we ran. In this one, actually, is where I learned to use one stack of paper per team. If you hand out too much, then people kind of silo off even within those small groups. Get people huddled around one page. So introduce the session and the format. It's a bit different, so you need to explain what's going on, what they can expect, what you're going to be asking them, and what they should be thinking about. First, hand out that starting page of background information and get them talking. Give teams about 10 minutes to discuss it. And you're really going to have to work hard as the incident lead here to kind of get people to open up and start talking about the tools they know, the information about the systems they understand. Pose open questions. Don't kind of drive the direction of this, but get people discussing. Do remember to get people to write down their thoughts. There is so much value in the notes that people make during these incidents to look back over. Just make sure they write it down. This is a wonderful one where we ended up at the end exploring what the hell those miss, hit, pass, and synthetic even meant, because a lot of us didn't actually understand it. It gives us time to kind of reflect on what people know and don't know. So bring the teams together after 10 minutes, and you want to ask them the following questions. Now, keep in mind that mindset that we had, with engineering first mindset. We're trying to break that apart and get people thinking about how do we really want engineers to address an incident? So start by asking, can they take any action? Very leading. Can you do anything right now with the information that you have? Could you fail over the website? Would that fix things enough for you to go to sleep and fix it in the morning? Could you turn a flag off? Can you roll back a change? Or do you not have enough information? Probably the alerts aren't enough to make an action. So what more information do you need? What tools are you going to dig into? Splunk? You're going to look in Grafana? You're going to look in for your exceptions somewhere, your logs. And finally, the one that's really critical for engineers, like, what are you communicating? You need to explain to the rest of the business what's going on. How are you doing that? To who? At this point, people actually get really excited. So it's your job as a moderator to moderate that conversation. At the FT, there's a mascot that our parent company have. I can't remember what it's called. Denshiba is what it's called. So just pass that around is what we do, one person talking at a time, to make sure it's fair, because there's so much information that can spew out at this point. Then, hand out the next bit of information. It might be what they've asked for, it might not, but just kind of keep driving it forwards. You want to repeat the handouts and questions until the incident is over. And the most important thing here is to leave plenty of time for questions at the end. You've got all that material with their notes, what people are thinking about. Spend 10, 15 minutes just digging into what people didn't know. What were the surprises? In this one, we ended up digging into the dashboards. People just weren't aware of what our important dashboards were and what our important metrics were. And we ended up spending 10 minutes talking about all the most important things in that area. And it was great. And then it meant 10 people left all on the same page. So after the first 2 workshops, it became clear that that question about actions, what could people do, we weren't all on the same page there. And we started looking into how we could address that, like what could we do to, across our 45 engineers, make it clear that you don't have to fix the code first. There are other things you can do to resolve an incident quickly. And we ended up documenting this generic runbook for 180 systems. One place where we just list all the actions that you can take. We ended up calling it the ft.com incident toolbelt. We also need to build one for the app. That's coming soon. And it looks something like this. We talk about what it's like to be an incident lead, like the Slack command that you have to use to start an incident at the FT. And the various different actions like failing over the FT or turning a flag off that you could take. And each action has a bit of prep. Like, what can you do before an incident happens? Or, worst case, maybe during an incident. But like, what do you need to do to be able to use this action? There's a lot of configuration, downloading the right CLI tool, document that, the usage. And then also a bit of context about when you could use this action. We list our previous incidents, like when there's been a problem with content in the US. Oh, well, that's a great situation in which you fail over. Looks something like that. Oh. And we ended up running training sessions on each one. And this complemented our incident workshops that were very lightweight and very, they were kind of hands-off. The generic runbook, when we ran through the action in practice, we did them properly. We actually applied them in production. Because what we wanted was for people to come away feeling confident that they could do this and minimize that time, that kind of consideration of should I not fail over the website. We wanted the people to come away from this and go, yeah, I know how to do it. I'm not fearful of that. And let's go for it. So, the results and takeaways. Did it work? Did the documentation help? We ran 6 incident workshops, and we developed 3 incidents, which I'm going to share later. And we also ran 6 toolbox workshops as well, so 2 a month. We asked, before and after each incident workshop, how likely were you to help out during an incident as an engineer? And it looked something like this. Before, it was so-so. People were interested, but on the whole, there was a lot of, it goes back to those quotes around confidence. And immediately after, people were really interested. It was like, yeah, okay, I might not know everything about these systems. What we did not teach was 180 systems worth of kind of in-depth knowledge. But they were still willing to help out. Favorite quote, solving out-of-hours incidents is probably not as scary as most of us think. the workshops expanded everyone's mental model of our systems. We went from this place where we were fixing things in the code because that's what we understood as engineers. That was what we could fix. And this was our comfort zone. And out of these workshops, we started being aware of these other third parties like Fastly that we rely on critically to serve the FT. And they are important, and we might need to do something and look at the metrics in there to be able to fix an incident. And we got better at the process. We just understood it. It became that second nature that we were looking for. A quote from an engineer here on the flip side, coming out of these incident workshops, they learned to focus initially on the comms and the experience, and less on finding that technical root cause and fixing the code. Like, we don't want to wait 15 minutes to deploy a system to get the website working again if we can fail over in 2. And we started learning from our old incidents. This is a wonderful exercise, going back over what's already happened. Often it means we go over the old actions and we realize we haven't actually done anything still. Uh-oh. But I have a nice story here about something that we did learn through one of these incident workshops. That RSS incident meant that across the FT, our user experience was degraded. There was one, it was a crawler interested in finding out about the latest news. But they were crawling so much, it was causing issues on reading articles, searching across the website. At the time, we did nothing. We actually did nothing in the incident. It kind of just sorted itself out. Not great, but it was all right. Through the incident workshop, someone actually suggested as an action to scale down the system. Could they scale down the page that was serving the RSS feeds to hopefully provide a better user experience for our customers and cut off that degradation? Yes, it meant that we lost a page of the website, but actually, on the whole, it meant we were better off for our users. And it was the perfect answer. And we started getting quotes like, "I'm keen to work towards being on the out-of-hours incident team." The most important thing, engineers actually did join the team when we asked them. We're now up to 11, but we've still got more to go. So we're going to continue running these in the year. Many of the people were dialed into that DNS incident. They were comfortable knowing that, yeah, okay, I can join, I might be able to help out, and if not, I can still learn. And that was a wonderful thing to see. So what are we doing this year? We're going to continue promoting joining that out-of-hours team through these workshops. And I'm going to start evangelizing across our company to do these, to learn about these silos of information and knowledge in different teams that we have, try and break that apart. So, it's almost lunchtime, some key takeaways. Practicing incident management can prepare you for that unexpected situation. You might not have that in-depth knowledge, but you don't need it, as long as you get a clear understanding of those quick actions that you can take. And confidence doesn't have to come from in-depth knowledge. If you understand and increase your mental model, you'll be able to figure out ways of solving incidents quicker. So please take this back to your teams, have a lot of fun. We're hiring at the FT. Feel free to have a look. In this talk, I read a lot. There's some really interesting stuff going on about learning from your incidents. And here are the examples. I encourage you to have a look. They are real from the FT, and they should provide a good bit of solid starting point for you all. So thank you. I'd love to hear your questions.
All right, thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
So we're going to do some questions. I do have one question for you,
Ooh,
though.
yeah.
Given that you created some of these workshops, you must have personally learned a lot about the incident that you were creating it around. Could you talk about that some?
I think my favorite, well, first thing I learned is we really don't follow up on our actions from incident reports. That is just like the thing. But generally, my favorite one was learning this whole new idea of scaling a system down to provide a better service for the rest of the website. Going back to that, I just hadn't ever considered that. And through kind of working with all these other people, everybody with great ideas and understanding of different systems, that's what I was getting the most out of these workshops.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Who has a question for Sam? Anybody? Surely there's some. Okay, I have another one. So you said you learned a lot, right? And you're trying to get more people to do these incident workshops. Are you incentivizing, like, leveling up as a part of running the workshops? How are you?
We don't actually have it. So at the FT, we have an engineering, not a curriculum, competencies. We say it's like a path to progression. It isn't part of that at the moment, but I think you would feed a lot of it in. A lot of this goes around back to communication and being able to work with others. And that's a large part of what we look for in development. So yes, in a way.
Cool.
Given all of your efforts in running the workshops, was there anyone who still didn't want to engage, still didn't feel comfortable? Kind of, how did that go?
Yeah, we had a few people, because we were asking after every workshop, like, what did you get out of this? Are you in a place where we can kind of follow up and say, would you like to join the team? There were a lot of people joining so that when they were on the OpsCops team, actually, that they were more confident in being able to fix issues at the time. And there will always be people who are just not interested in it and not motivated by it. And that's okay. Even if they're still coming along to the workshop, they might have good ideas. I think that's worth being aware of. This isn't something to pressure on people or kind of commit people to joining that out-of-hours team. It definitely needs to be voluntary and something that motivates people.
You said the keyword there, which I wanted to follow up on. What was the main motivation for people to join the out-of-hours support team?
That is a really interesting question. We didn't actually ask, like, specifically that. But I would hazard a guess that it's different for everybody. I can talk about myself, though. I see each incident as a puzzle, and it's so rewarding to kind of work with others to solve that problem. It's just a massive endorphin hit, I think. But I think everyone would be different. And I'd be interested to kind of learn more around that. Why are people motivated to actually help out during incidents? Yeah, thank you.
Hi. So you've said that you don't really need to have all that in-depth knowledge for all the systems.
Yeah.
Did you find, did you have an incident where you really needed that in-depth information and there was no one on the call who had that information?
That is a great question. I think the way the incidents tend to work, a lot of that, having that, not needing to have that in-depth knowledge is about getting people on board into incidents as like an entry point. Because otherwise there's just like this expectation that you have to prepare a lot to be able to join and be comfortable doing that. But I think really, like, the DNS one of the reasons why that DNS outage was such a success was because the 10 people helping out all knew each other, all knew these systems and the connections, and had those mental models that really supported that incident. And I think that is critical to be able to solving something quickly. So there's a balance there about having the right people. But this is a great approach to getting kind of people new to incidents involved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great question.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering, with staff sort of turnover and staff churn, I don't know if you have this issue, but how do you pick the right time to train people, and do these workshops? If we have a new starter, I kind of don't want to do this for one person, I want to do it for a bunch of people. Do you have a magic sort of formula?
I think with these workshops, we tend to have like 8 to 10 people in each one. A lot of the reason why we started them in the first place was people swapping teams or leaving the company, actually. That's how we got down to 5 people. And we just stopped asking, are you interested in joining? I think it just totally depends. I don't think I have an answer to that one. I think that is a case of look at your company and see. But running this with like 3 people, that's perfectly acceptable. It's so lightweight that you should be able to apply it and get value out of that. And running it, and also equally, running it with people that already are involved with incidents, there's a lot of value in that too. So make sure you've got that nice mix of people involved. Okay. Question down there.
Hey.
Hi.
So you showed that in the workshops that you're doing, you had like graphs and examples of what actually happened during the incident. Was that information that you already had, or was that something that you had to go like collate after.
Thank you for asking this question. Yeah, a lot of that comes from our incident reports. So that's what you lean on. You go through. If you aren't already kind of getting screenshots of the graphs and like what the website looks like at the time, and like putting together that timeline of what people have done during an incident, now is the time to start doing that, because it means you can produce these kind of things. And it's so valuable to be able to look back over. Yeah. So yes, we do.
Hi. Several of the talks yesterday talked about building trust and credibility with other teams in your organization. I was just wondering, have you yet, or are you going to publicize what you're doing to sort of wider business groups to build that kind of credibility for your team?
I think we need to. There's a lot of what I've done and talked about here is just within our group, like people we know, people we work with day to day. The reality of an incident is actually we're working across the company to kind of resolve the big outage was a big part of that. So I'd like to explore that more, but we're not currently doing that. There are some more general workshops that we do within the company to learn about how to kind of prepare for an incident, and that's kind of cross-cutting across disciplines and across teams. So it can be applied in that area. Thank you.
Hi, quick.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, the question is, if we have a team with multiple vendors, couple of full-time employees, couple of contractors, so there's a varying age limit as well. So in this kind of dynamics, how this model means how we can motivate the people to come to a out-of-hours approach.
Yeah, it's really tricky. I mean, it goes back to that earlier question about like what motivates people to join an incident. Like, are they willing? You can't force. Well, within our company anyway, we'd never force somebody to join. The contractors one is interesting actually. With our 35 coming out, it's a no-go for us. This is all perm staff that are getting involved and learning about how to support incidents. I think the best advice I have is ask. Find out about what people are thinking in your team and whether they're interested or not. Kind of what it would take for them to go, yeah, okay, I would be up for it. There's probably more maybes rather than no's than you think. But you've got to ask to find out. That would be my advice. Okay. I think, Nora, there was a... Oh. I'm doing an armor with Luke and Laura as well later on, so if there's more questions we run out of time, come to that. We've got loads. Me and Luke would love to share some more insights about the FT.
Hi, I'm Simone from BBC
Hi.
Sounds. Hi. What's your SLA when you intervene to an incident?
Ooh, that's a really interesting question. So SLAs, we don't really have SLAs actually at the moment. We're still kind of learning a lot about how we get on with incidents. I think one way of describing it is there's a lot of goodwill that goes into us resolving incidents at the moment. We're not professional about this, I think, yet, compared to, say, Netflix, but we're also not as big as Netflix. We also have the luxury of building and serving our own products. The membership team and the content and metadata team, they actually have contracts with third parties that they get paid for. Those are the teams that do have SLAs and money involved. We're a bit more decoupled from that, which gives us a bit of luxury, but I think it's something we're working towards having. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. I got one right down here in the front. Sorry to make you run. Thank you.
In the beginning, you said that everybody tries to fix the problem, fix the situation, but nobody looks who and what did before this. Wouldn't it be more simple to fix the problem if you know the reason of the root cause?
Now that goes into like the blameless culture part of incidents, I think, quite importantly. The Dine incident is a great example. In that first hour, which I wasn't part of, we actually understood the changes that did happen that might have led to the incident. We still don't concretely know why we lost our domain. But once it was clear through the recent changes, then we just switched total direction and became very disciplined about focusing on recovery. We understood the situation. We couldn't do anything about that. And we knew we needed to recover and restore our data. And that was the focus for the whole team. So there is an element of like, yeah, have a nice list of changes that have happened recently to be able to kind of have that context available. But it might be better, for example, to fail over the website than roll back the change, depending on how quick each one is. For us, failing over the website, a couple of minutes. But rolling back a change, that may be 20 minutes. And that's not a great user experience. So we lean more towards avoiding changes and using other actions to resolve incidents if we can. That's the understanding that I have. One at the front.
You said you don't have a rota.
Yeah.
How do you sort of make sure that calls get sort of reasonably fairly balanced across
the
people?
Yeah. We have we just maintain a spreadsheet, and we work with our operations team that Sarah runs here to make sure that it's distributed. So they helpfully record every time that they called out to somebody and whether or not they've actually answered. And we work together to make sure that that's up to date. And that just helps balance it. Also, just having a bigger team helps as well with that. Yeah, simple approach. Cool. Any more for any more? Oh, yeah. One over here. Thank you.
Sorry, last one.
No, go for it.
So, following on from my previous question, would you say you have any advice for a greenfield project that is actually first time it goes live, so we don't actually have examples of any incidents that have happened before, and how you can prepare people to be on support for that?
Ah, that's an interesting one. Right.
That was the main reason I asked the previous one.
You're going to learn a lot, that's for sure, but you're probably going to learn on the fly, right? But going back to the big incident in the beginning, like that was unusual, not something we'd ever thought about happening. You know, we'd not even thought about backing up that data held by our vendor. But I think if you go around and read, you can kind of, well, you could use our workshops, for example. But a lot of people are starting to talk about incidents that happen internally, and you could lean on those a bit, I would suspect. Because a lot of the incidents are the same, a lot of similarities. You just need to apply it to like the tools that you're currently using within your team and the actions that are available to your team to help resolve an incident. So kind of munging those two, I think, might get you there. Trying to think, off the top of my head, I don't have a list of like what kind of generic incidents there are, but I can kind of come and find me later and we can work through that. Okay.
That kind of reminds me of the concept of a pre-mortem. Like if this were to fail, how would
that would be helpful, yeah.
There's a lot of cool resources online for that. Any other questions for Sam?
1 minute, 27 seconds left.
Nice, perfect time. Did I see one in the back?
I think we're done.
Cool. Let's give another round of applause for Sam.
Thank you very much.